Hello and welcome to another video from S15 Studio. Today I'll be covering wall types and the creation of three different styles. We'll be creating a rendered block cavity, a brick cavity timber stud wall, and a brick cavity metal stud wall. You can find PDFs of each wall type on my website s15studio.com and then head over to the file share heading where you can download these PDFs for free. Okay, so let's get started. Wall types are a critical component of BIM in Revit because they ensure consistency and accuracy throughout the design and construction process. Wall types allow architects, engineers, and designers to create walls with specific attributes, including thickness, materials, insulation, structural properties, and appearance. Designers can quickly swap one type for another, update materials, and analyze the building's performance based on the properties defined within the wall types. This level of detail and control contributes to efficient and accurate building design and documentation. So first thing we'll do is we'll go to the Architecture tab, Build panel. We have our wall tool. Here in our type selector, we have various different wall types. I'm using the UK metric library, but if you're in a different region and have downloaded a different library, you're going to have different wall types available to you. And these particular wall types would be specific to my region. So to get started, I'm going to choose the wall external 215 brick, and I want you to choose a wall type that is similar to this. So it only contains one material, which is the brick. So I'm going to select it, and I'm just going to constrain it to my level 1, draw in my first wall type. We'll add a length of 3 meters. Once we've done that, I'll select it. I'll go to Edit Type. And when we're creating our own wall type, the first step is the most important step, which is to duplicate. If we don't duplicate, all we're going to do is we're going to edit this current wall type. So we'll select Duplicate. And when we do, we get the same name with the addition of a number 2 at the end. So we're just duplicating this wall type. And for now, we're going to leave that name until the end when we create our wall type. Then we'll come back and we'll edit the name. So press OK. Next, we need to open up the structure. So we'll go to Value, Edit. And this opens up our Edit Assembly. And I'll open up the preview box down the bottom left-hand side. When we're creating a wall type, the thing to remember is we must be aware of what our structure is, and that must be in between our core boundaries. The first wall type we're going to create is the render block cavity wall type. So referring to the PDF, starting from the exterior side, we have 20 mil render, 100 mil block, cavity, insulation, block, plasterboard. And the main structure of the building will be the inner leaf of the blockwork. So we'll change that first. So it's the main structure. We'll then come over to the material. It's currently on brick common. So if we select it, there's a small box with 3 dots. If we hit that, it's going to open up the material browser. And I then just need to scroll down to find concrete masonry units, and it's a low density block. So I'll select that and press OK. Next, we change the thickness of that, which is 100 mil. Press Enter. How we can distinguish which is the exterior side and interior side is just to the top. We have exterior side and interior side. So next, what I want to do is to add the internal plasterboard. So I can select number 3, Insert. And when I do that, I've inserted a new layer, but it's gone above my core boundary, so I need to bring it down. So I select Down. And when I hit the drop down arrow, this plasterboard is in structural, so we have to reassign it a new function. And we have various different functions. We have structure, substrate, thermal air layer, finish 1, finish 2, and membrane. So our structure 1 is a layer that supports the remainder of the wall, floor, or roof. Substrate 2 is a material such as a plywood or gypsum board, which acts as a foundation for another material. The thermal air layer, this provides insulation and prevents air penetration. Then we have finish 1. So this typically is used as an exterior layer. And finish 2 would be our interior layer. Next is the membrane layer. This is commonly used for any material that prevents water vapor penetration. so our vapor control layer, and so on. When we use the membrane layer, we would always assign a thickness of 0. We don't want to include that in the thickness of the wall. So we need to change our function for our plasterboard. So we'll change it over to finish number 2 as it's internal. We'll then go to our material, select the box with 3 dots, and I want to go for a gypsum wallboard. You'll just select a material that's similar to this if you don't have that in your material browser, and the thickness of that is 12.5. Now referring back to the PDF, we're going to now go to the exterior side. So we're going to move above the blockwork. Next thing up is 50mm PIR insulation. So go to my core boundary. I'm going to insert a new layer. And for our insulation, we'll go to thermal air layer. Go to my material browser, hit the square with 3 dots, and I'm going to look for a rigid insulation. Press OK, and the thickness for that was 50mm. Next, we'll insert another layer. This was a thermal air layer, and this is for our cavity. So we'll go all the way up to the top, look for air, press OK, and that's 50mm for our air cavity. Next, we'll add in another layer, and this will be our 100mm block on the external side, and it's non-structural. So the function for that will be finish 1, as it's an external finish. We'll go to concrete masonry unit, lightweight, and it's 100mm thickness. And lastly, we'll add in our render, which again is a finish 1, as it's an external side. Come down to render beige smooth. If you don't have this material, just add something similar for now. And the thickness for that is 20mm. Press OK. So now that we've created our wall type, we just need to come back and rename it. The reason I would leave it to the end is because now we know the buildup of the wall, so we can name it correctly. So I'll choose rename, and I'm going to call this wall type _01. Then it's an external wall type, so we'll leave that. And we're going to work from the external side to the internal side. So we had 20mm render. So 20 RDR dash 100mm LB LK for light block work dash 50 air dash 50 insulation dash 100 light block work dash 12 plasterboard. Then press OK. So we now renamed it to wall type 1, external 20mm render, 100mm lightweight blockwork, 50mm air cavity, 50 insulation, 100mm light blockwork, and 12 plasterboard. It is important to keep continuity with the naming of your wall types. So if anyone was to use your drawing, they would understand what that wall type is. So we'll then press OK. So that's our wall type 1. We're now going to move on to the second wall type, which is our brick cavity timber stud. So what we can do is we can select this and we can copy it and use that as the basis for our next wall type. So we'll go to edit type, duplicate, we'll leave the name with the number 2 at the end, press OK. So now we've duplicated wall type 1. We can then go to edit, and now we can safely create our second wall type. So it's the same process as before. We go to the structure, edit, and we can now edit the wall type. So referring to the PDF, from the external side, we have a 102.5mm brick cavity vapor control barrier, 12mm plywood sheathing. Then we have a 150 by 50mm timber frame, and between the studs we have 90mm insulation. On the outside of the studs we have 40mm insulation, and then it's closed off with a 12.5mm plasterboard. And on the left we can see how it's all built up. So starting from the exterior side this time, our function is finish 1, so that's perfect. What we need to do is change our material over to a brick. So we'll go all the way up to brick. And we have brick common. Again, if you don't have this material, just select a similar brick to continue. Press OK. Then go to our thickness, which is 102.5. So we've added our brick. Next is our 50mm air cavity. So in our function, we change over to thermal air layer. Our material is air. Press OK. and the cavity thickness is 50. Then we had a vapor control barrier, so we need to change that to membrane layer. Then come down to the bottom, we have a vapor retarder, or you might have something similar in your material browser. Press OK, and that has a thickness of 0. The reason we add a thickness of 0 is in reality those vapor control barriers are 0.125 millimeters thick, so it's not important to include this into our wall type. And next down we had our wood sheathing, so we'll change that over to a substrate 2. I'll then find a wood sheathing chipboard, press OK, and that was 12 mil. Next, we had our main structure, which is our timber frame. So first, our function is correct at structure 1. Next is our material. Down in my material browser, I have structural timber joists and rafters. The type of timber that I want to use isn't included in the project material, so I need to add this material from the main library. So I come down to this change your view icon, go to AEC materials, and I scroll down to timber C24. So to bring this material into the project materials, I press the arrow pointing up. That'll add it into the project. The reason all of those materials aren't included in our project is because if they were included in the project from the start, the file size would be so big and it will slow down our project. So they try to minimize the amount of materials that are actually loaded in from the start. So once we've added in our timber C4, again, if you don't have that material, just add in a similar material and press OK. Our thickness is 150 mil. So referring to the PDF, we have 90 mil insulation that is between the studs. So when you're creating your wall type, if your sole purpose of creating the wall type is to determine the R value, then instead of including the 150 mil timber, you would choose the 90 mil insulation, and then you'd add a 60 mil air cavity gap. This would then give you the correct R value, as we wouldn't include the timber. But as I'm not using these for the R value, I'm going to include the timber in my wall type. Then outside of the timber structure, we had the 40 mil insulation with a vapor barrier and 12 mil plasterboard. So there we have our 12 mil plasterboard. So we're going to keep that. And what I can do is add in the membrane, choose the vapor retarder, leave it at 0. And I'll also add in the 40 mil insulation. So I'll change my function to thermal, go to my material and go to rigid insulation, change the thickness over to 40 mil. So press OK, and then we're back to the type properties where we just need to rename and update our wall type. So we'll choose rename. I'm going to remove the number 2, come back to the start. So it's our wall type number 2. Then it's an external wall type. So EXT stands for an external wall type, which it is. If it's an internal wall type, we'll use INT. So I'm just going to delete out the remainder so we can start fresh. So first thing is the brickwork, which is 102.5 mil, but I'm only going to type in 102 as there's no need to write the 0.5 in our title. BWK for brick, -50 air for our cavity. Then I had 12 plyboard, then 150 mil timber frame, and next we had 40 mil insulation, and finally the 12 gypsum board. Press OK, and there's our new wall type 2. And finally we have wall type 3, which is our brick cavity metal stud. So we'll select our wall type 2, copy it, select it again, edit type, duplicate, and we see there's our wall type 2 name with the number 2 at the end. So press OK. Then again, we go to the same structure and edit. So referring to the PDF, in this one we have the same 102.5 facing brick. We have an air cavity of 50. We then have 90 mil insulation on the outer side of our structure. Then a 10 mil cement particle board, Our main structure is 100 mm steel framing, and there's 50 mm insulation between the studs. Then there's a vapor control barrier and two 15 mm plasterboard on the inner face. Again, you can find these PDFs on my website, s15studio.com, and head over to the File Share heading. So first is the 102.5 brick. We also have 50 mm air cavity, so the first two don't change. Next down we had the 90 mm insulation, so we'll go to membrane layer, change that over to thermal, go to our rigid insulation board, and that was a total of 90 mm. Next we had a 10 mm cement particle board, so we'll go to number 4, and it's a substrate. We then change it over to the particle board. So there isn't a cement particle board in the project materials browser, so we need to add in that material. So we'll go to change the view, AEC material, and I'll scroll down to the particle board. Again, if you don't have this material, you can add a similar material. Once it's added in, we press OK, and the thickness of that was 10 mil. Next, we're going to add in the structure. So the function one is structure 1, which is correct. And we want to add in the steel frame. So we'll go to the material browser, and we need to find a structural light gauge steel, which isn't in the project material browser. So we need to go to the AEC materials, scroll down, and there's a structure light gauge steel. So hit the arrow, bring it into the project materials, press OK, and the thickness was 100 mil. Next was a vapor barrier. So what we could do is just select this from the previous wall type and press up, which will bring it up into the correct position. And then lastly, we had 2 layers of 15 mil wall board. So I'll change this to finish type 2. Go to gypsum wallboard, press OK, change the thickness to 15, and for the remainder as well, 15. So just like the timber frame, if you're looking for the correct R value, what we would do here is instead of adding in the 100 mil steel frame, you'd add in the 50 mil insulation plus a 50 mil air gap, and then you get a better R value. We then press OK, and the last thing we need to do is just rename it. So we'll go to rename, we'll select everything, delete it. This is our wall type 3. So we have an external wall. It was 102 BWK for brick, 50 mil air for our cavity, 90 mil insulation, 10 mil particle board, 100 mil steel frame, 15 mil gypsum board, and another 15 mil gypsum board. Press OK. Press OK, and we're back into the project. So now we have our 3 wall types. So now we've created our 3 wall types. If these wall types are ones which you're going to be using in future projects, what you can do is save this into perhaps a template for future projects. So now we've created our wall types, and they are now in the project. So if I was to delete them, they're not deleted from the project. If I go to my wall tool, type selector, there we have our wall type 1, 2, and 3. So we're able to freely go about and start our project. So at any point of the project, if the specification of the wall was to ever change, that's not a problem. So for example, using my wall type 3, if we had created our project and the specification of our steel was to increase from 100 mil to 150 mil, what we would do is select the wall, go to edit type, structure, edit. There's our structural frame. We can just change it to 150, press OK, and it will automatically update within the project. Don't forget to head over to s15studio.com to download those PDFs for free. If you found this video beneficial, I cover this topic in great detail in my beginner to advanced level course, which is available on my website. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you in the next video.